Erect and motionless, the sun stood with crossed arms.
See that illustrating these new drum heads I just put up while listening to Siddhartha. And
it is not fitting for a Brahmin to speak angrily.
Maybe play some more, maybe fucking go home.
But indignation moves my heart. I do not wish to hear that request a second time from your lips. Slowly the Brahmin rose. Siddhartha stood mute with crossed arms. What are you waiting for? Asked the father. Siddhartha said, You know what? Indignant, the father left the room. Indignant, he sought his bed and lay down. An hour later, since no sleep came to his eyes, the Brahmin got up, paced to and fro, stepped out of the house. He peered through the small window into the room. There he saw Siddhartha standing, with crossed arms, unmoved. His light-colored robe shimmered pale. With distress in his heart, the father returned to his bed. An hour later, since no sleep came to his eyes, the Brahmin got up again, paced to and fro, stepped out of the house, saw the risen moon. He peered through the window into the room. There stood Siddhartha, unmoved, with crossed arms, the moonlight mirrored by his bare shins. With anxiety in his heart, his father went back to his bed. And he came again an hour later, and came again 2 hours later, peered through the small window, saw Siddhartha standing in the moonlight, in the starlight, in the darkness. And came again from hour to hour, silent, peered into the room, saw the unmoved stander, filled his heart with anger, filled his heart with apprehension, filled his heart with fear, filled it with sorrow. And in the final hour of night, before the day began, he returned, stepped into the room, and saw the youth standing there. And he looked big and foreign. Siddhartha, he said, what are you waiting for? You know what? Will you keep standing and waiting until the day becomes noon, becomes evening? I will stand and wait. You will grow tired, Siddhartha. I will grow tired. You will fall asleep, Siddhartha. I will not fall asleep. You will die, Siddhartha. I will die. And would you rather die than obey your father? Siddhartha has always obeyed his father. Then you will give up your plan? Siddhartha will do what his father will say. The first gleam of day entered the room. The Brahmin saw that Siddhartha's knees were quivering slightly. He saw no quivering in his face. Siddhartha's eyes gazed far away. Now the father realized that Siddhartha was no longer with him and in his homeland, that he had already left him. The father touched Siddhartha's shoulder. You will, he said, go into the forest and become a shamana.
Shit.
If you find bliss in the forest, then come and teach me bliss. If you find disillusion, then come back, and let us jointly sacrifice to the gods again.
Crap.
Now go and kiss your mother. Tell her where you are going. But for me, it is time to go to the river and perform the first ablution. He removed his hand from his son's shoulder and went out. Siddhartha reeled when he tried to walk. He subdued his limbs, bowed to his father, and went to his mother to do as his father had said. When, in the first light of day, walking slowly on numb legs, he left the still silent town, a shadow, crouching by the last hut, stood up and joined the pilgrim. It was Govinda. You have come, said Siddhartha, and smiled. I have come, said Govinda. Among the shamanas. That evening they caught up with the ascetics, the gaunt shamanas, and offered them fellowship and obedience. They were accepted. Siddhartha gave his robe away to a poor Brahmin in the street. All he now wore was the loincloth and the unstitched earth-colored cloak. He ate only once a day and no cooked food. He fasted for 2 weeks. He fasted for 4 weeks. The flesh vanished from his thighs and cheeks. Hot dreams flared from his enlarged eyes. The nails grew long on his withering fingers, as did on his chin the dry and bristly beard. His gaze grew icy when it encountered women. His mouth curled in scorn when he walked through a town with people in lovely clothes. He saw dealers dealing, princes hunting, mourners mourning their dead, whores offering themselves, doctors tending patients, priests setting the day of sowing, lovers loving, mothers nursing their babies, and everything was unworthy of his eyes. Everything lied, everything stank of lies, everything shammed meaning and happiness and beauty, and everything was unacknowledged decay. The world tasted bitter, life was torture. Siddhartha had a goal, a single one, to become empty. Empty of thirst, empty of desire, empty of dreams, empty of joy and sorrow. To die away from himself, no longer be self. To find peace with an emptied heart. To be open to miracles and unselfed thinking. That was his goal. When the entire self was transcended and extinct, when every drive and every mania in the heart had fallen silent, then the ultimate was bound to awaken, the innermost essence, which is no longer ego, the great secret. Siddhartha stood silent in the vertical blaze of the sun, burning with pain, burning with thirst, and he stood till he felt no pain or thirst. He stood silent in the rainy season, the water dripping from his hair, over freezing shoulders, over freezing hips and legs, and the penitent stood until his legs and shoulders were no longer freezing, until they fell silent, until they were still. Silently he crouched in the twisting brambles, the blood dripping from his burning skin, the pus from abscesses, and Siddhartha lingered rigid, lingered motionless until no more blood flowed, until nothing more pricked, until nothing more burned. Siddhartha sat upright and learned to save breath, learned to get on with little breath, learned to stop breath. Beginning with breath, he learned how to calm his heartbeat, learned how to lessen the strokes until there were few and almost none. Taught by the eldest of the shamanas, Siddhartha practiced unselfing, practiced meditation according to the shamana rules. A heron flew over the bamboo forest, and Siddhartha took the heron into his soul, flew over forests and mountains, was a heron, ate fish, hungered heron hunger, spoke heron croaking, died heron death. A dead jackal lay on the sandy bank, and Siddhartha's soul slipped into the cadaver, was a dead jackal, lay on the shore, swelled, stank, rotted, was shredded by hyenas, was skinned by vultures, became a skeleton, became dust, wafted into the fields. And Siddhartha's soul returned, was dead, was rotted, was dispersed, had tasted the dismal drunkenness of the cycle of life, waited a new thirst like a hunter, waited for the gap through which he could escape the cycle, where the end of causes came, where painless eternity began. He killed his senses. He killed his memory. He slipped from his ego into 1,000 different formations. He was animal, was carcass, was rock, was wood, was water, and he always found himself again upon awakening. Sun was shining or moon, he was self again, swinging in the cycle, felt thirst, overcame thirst, felt new thirst. Siddhartha learned much among the shamanas. He learned to follow many paths away from his ego. He followed the path of unselfing through pain, through the voluntary suffering and overcoming of pain, of hunger, of thirst, of fatigue. He followed the path of unselfing through meditation, through thinking till the mind was empty of all notions. He learned to follow those and other paths. He left his self 1,000 times, for hours on end and days on end he lingered in the non-self. But though the paths led away from the ego, in the end, they always led back to the ego. Though Siddhartha fled his ego 1,000 times, dwelling in nothingness, in animals, in rock, the return was inevitable, since he found himself again, in sunlight or in moonlight, in shade or in rain, and again was ego and Siddhartha, and again felt the torment of the onerous cycle. Next to him lived Govinda, his shadow. following the same paths, undergoing the same efforts. They seldom spoke more to each other than was required by service and exercises. Sometimes the two of them walked through the villages begging food for themselves and their teachers. "What do you think, Govinda?" Siddhartha once said during their begging. "What do you think? Have we made progress? Have we reached goals?" Govinda replied, "We have learned, and we are learning more. You will become a great shamana, Siddhartha. You have learned every exercise quickly. The old shamanas often admire you. Someday you will become a saint, O Siddhartha." Siddhartha said, "It does not seem that way to me, my friend. What I have learned so far among the shamanas, O Govinda, I could have learned more quickly and more simply. I could have learned it in any tavern of a red light district, my friend, among the draymen and dicers." Govinda said, "Siddhartha is joking with me. How could you have learned meditation? How could you have learned to hold your breath? How could you have learned insensitivity to pain and hunger there among those miserable people?" And Siddhartha murmured as if to himself, "What is meditation? What is abandonment of the body? What is fasting? What is holding of the breath? It is flight from the ego. It is a brief breakout from the torture of ego. It is a brief numbing of pain and of the senselessness of life. The same flight, the same brief numbing is found by the ox driver at the inn when he drinks a few cups of rice wine or fermented coconut milk. He then no longer feels his self. He then no longer feels the pains of life. He then finds brief numbing. Asleep over his cup of rice wine, he finds what Siddhartha and Govinda find when they slip away from their bodies after long exercises and linger in the non-self. That is the way it is, O Govinda." Govinda said, "You say that, O friend, and yet you know that Siddhartha is no ox driver and a shamana no drunkard. The drinker may find numbing, he may find brief flight and rest, but he returns from his illusion and finds everything unchanged. He has grown no wiser, has gathered no knowledge, has ascended no levels." And Siddhartha said with a smile, "I do not know. I have never been a drinker. But in my exercises and meditations, I have found only brief numbing, and I am still as far from wisdom, from redemption, as when I was a baby in my mother's womb. That I know, O Govinda, that I know." Another time, when Siddhartha and Govinda left the forest and went to the village, begging food for their brothers and their teacher, Siddhartha again spoke. "Now tell me, Govinda, are we really on the right path? Are we really approaching knowledge? Are we really approaching redemption? Or are we not perhaps going in a circle, we who thought we were escaping the cycle?" Govinda said, "We have learned a lot, Siddhartha. We still have a lot to learn. We are not going in a circle, we are going upward. The circle is a spiral. We have already ascended several levels." Siddhartha replied, "How old do you think our eldest shamana is, our venerable teacher?" Govinda said, "Our eldest may be 60 years old." And Siddhartha, "He has turned 60 and has not reached nirvana. He will turn 70 and 80, and you and I, we will get almost as old, and we will practice, and we will fast, and we will meditate, but we will never reach nirvana. Not he, not we. O Govinda, I believe that of all the shamanas, perhaps not one will reach nirvana. We will find consolations, we find numbings, we learn skillful ways to deceive ourselves, but the essential thing, the path of paths, that we do not find." "Please do not," said Govinda, "speak such terrifying words, Siddhartha. Among so many learned men, among so many Brahmins, among so many strict and venerable shamanas, among so many seekers, so many ardent strivers, so many saintly men, how could no one have found the path of paths?" But Siddhartha said in a voice containing as much sadness as mockery, in a somewhat sad and somewhat mocking voice, "Soon, Govinda, your friend will leave this path of the shamanas, which he has followed with you for such a long time. I suffer from thirst, O Govinda, and my thirst has not lessened on this long Shamana path. I have always thirsted for knowledge. I have always been full of questions. I have questioned the Brahmins year after year, and I have questioned the holy Vedas year after year. Perhaps, O Govinda, it would have been just as good, would have been just as smart and just as beneficial to question the rhinoceros bird or the chimpanzee. I have taken a long time, and I still have not finished in order to learn, O Govinda, that one can learn nothing. There is, I believe, no such thing as what we call learning. There is, O my friend, only one knowledge. It is everywhere. It is Atman. It is in me and in you and in every being. And I am starting to believe that this knowledge has no worse enemy than the wish to know, than learning. Now Govinda halted on the path, raised his hands, and said, "Please, Siddhartha, do not terrify your friend with such talk. Your words arouse terror in my heart. And just think, where would the holiness of prayers be? Where would the venerability of the Brahmins be? Where the holiness of the Shamanas, if what you say were true, if there were no such thing as learning? What, O Siddhartha, what would become of everything that is holy on earth, valuable, venerable?" And Govinda murmured verses to himself, verses from an Upanishad. When the purified and pondering mind is absorbed in Atman, the bliss of the heart cannot be stated in words. But Siddhartha kept silent. He thought about the words that Govinda had spoken to him, and thought the words all the way through. Yes, he thought, standing with a bowed head, what would be left of everything that seemed holy to us? What is left? What turns out to be true? And he shook his head. Once, after the two youths had spent some 3 years with the Shamanas, sharing their exercises, a report, a rumor, a legend reached them through various roads and roundabout routes. Someone had appeared, named Gautama, the Sublime One, the Buddha. He had supposedly overcome the sorrow of the world in himself and had stopped the wheel of rebirths. Teaching and surrounded by disciples, he was wandering through the land with no property, with no home, with no wife, in the yellow cloak of an ascetic, but with a serene brow, a blissful man. And Brahmins and princes were bowing to him and becoming his followers. This legend, this rumor, this tale resounded, fragrantly wafted up here and there. In the towns, the Brahmins talked about it, in the forests, the Shamanas. The name of Gautama, the Buddha, kept reaching the ears of the youths, for better or for worse, with praise or with scorn. When the plague is raging in a country, and there is news of a man, a sage, an expert, whose speech and breath suffice to heal the stricken, and this news crosses the country, and everyone talks about it, many believe, many doubt, but soon many set out to seek the sage, the helper. And this was similar. The legend, the fragrant legend of Gautama, the Buddha, the sage from the caste of the Shakyas, was crisscrossing the land. He possessed, said the believers, supreme knowledge. He remembered his earlier lives. He had reached nirvana and would never return to the cycle, never submerge in the troubled river of formations. Many splendid and incredible stories were told about him. He had worked miracles, had vanquished the devil, had spoken with the gods. But enemies and non-believers said that this Gautama was a vain seducer who spent his days in luxurious pleasure, scorned sacrifices, lacked learning, and performed neither exercises nor castigations. The rumors about the Buddha sounded sweet. These reports were redolent with magic. After all, the world was ill, life was hard to endure, and lo, here a source seemed to spring, here a messenger seemed to be calling, a mild and comforting call, full of noble promises. Wherever the rumor about the Buddha rang out, the youths all over India sat up and took notice, felt yearning, felt hope. And among the Brahmin sons in the towns and villages, every pilgrim or stranger was welcome if he brought news of him, the Sublime One, the Shakyamuni. And the rumors reached the shamanas in the forest too, and Siddhartha too, and Govinda too, slowly, drop by drop, each drop heavy with hope, each drop heavy with doubt.
Getting somewhere.
They barely spoke about it, for the eldest of the shamanas was no friend of this legend. He had heard that this alleged Buddha had once been an ascetic and had lived in the forest, but then had turned back to luxury and worldly pleasure. And so the eldest had no esteem for this Gautama. O Siddhartha, Govinda once said to his friend, I was in the village today, and a Brahmin asked me into his house. And in his house there was a Brahmin's son from Magadha, and he had seen the Buddha with his own eyes and had heard him teach. Really, my breath was painful in my chest, and I thought to myself, if only both of us, if Siddhartha and I, live long enough to hear the teaching from the lips of that perfect one. Tell me, friend, should we not also go there and hear the teaching from the lips of the Buddha? Siddhartha said, O Govinda, I had always thought Govinda would remain with the shamanas. I had always thought it was his goal to turn 60 and 70 and to keep practicing the skills and exercises that are the resources of the shamana. But lo, I knew Govinda too little. I knew so little about his heart. So now you, dearest friend, wish to enter a path and go where the Buddha is proclaiming his teaching. Govinda said, You prefer to scoff? Scoff all you like, Siddhartha. But has not a longing, a desire awoken also in you to hear this teaching? And did you not once say to me that you would not follow the path of the shamanas much longer? Now Siddhartha laughed in his fashion, his voice tinged with a touch of sadness and a touch of mockery, and he said,
You got somewhere with
You
that.
have spoken well, Govinda, well, and you recall correctly. But please also recall what else you heard me say,
I think it's
namely, that I have become weary and distrustful of teaching and learning, and that I have little faith in words that come to us from teachers. But fine, dear friend, I am ready to hear this teaching, though in my heart of hearts I believe that we have already tasted the finest fruit of this teaching. Govinda said, Your readiness warms my heart, but tell me, how can that be possible? How could the teaching of the Gautama, before we hear it, have already revealed its finest fruit to us? Siddhartha said,
Ridiculously
Let
high
us enjoy
stretch
this
in the
fruit
head a little bit.
and wait and see about the rest, O Govinda.
I think.
However,
Got me some
this
charge
fruit,
in this fucker
for which we are already indebted to the Gautama, consists
some,
in his calling us away from the shamanas. As for whether he has something different and better to
Gonna
give
do
us,
some warming
O
up.
friend, let us wait with tranquil hearts.
Maybe I'll keep it going like this.
That same day, Siddhartha informed the eldest of the shamanas about his decision to leave him. He informed him with the courtesy and modesty that he disciples. But the shamana was furious that the two youths wanted to leave him, and he railed and ranted. Making their farewells as they departed. On their way, Govinda said, Oh, Siddhartha, you have learned more from the shamanas than I realized. It is hard, it is very hard, to spellbind an old shamana. Truly, had you remained there, you would soon have learned how to walk on water. I do not desire to walk on water, said Siddhartha. Let old shamans content themselves with such tricks. Gautama. In the town of Savatthi, every child knew the name of the sublime Buddha, and every woman was prepared to fill the alms bowl of Gautama's disciples, the silent supplicants. Near the town lay Gautama's favorite abode, the Jetavana Grove, which the wealthy merchant Anathapindika, a devoted admirer of the Sublime One, had given him and his followers. This area was indicated by the tales and responses heard by the two young ascetics during their quest for Gautama's whereabouts. And when they arrived in Savatthi, they were offered food at the very first home where they stopped and begged, and they took the food. And Siddhartha asked the woman who served them the food, "O benevolent lady, we would like to know the whereabouts of the Buddha, the most venerable, for we are two shamanas from the forest, and we have come to see him, the perfect one, and to hear the teaching from his lips." The woman said, "You have truly come to the right place, you shamanas from the forest. You see, the Sublime One is in Jetavana, in Anathapindika's garden.
I'll give it a go.
There you pilgrims may spend the night, for it has enough room for the countless people flocking here to hear the teaching from his lips." "Have you seen him with your own eyes?" The woman said, "I have seen him many..."
Do this privately. reggae song, and then get the fuck out of here. Make it hurt. Something, baby. Alright, I'll give myself one last shot at I'm Lazy. try a long guy. Poor short guy. You know what? Let's fucking call it.